Okay, so just before we start the live recording, I just wanted to say everyone should have a short questionnaire with them. So it was just to ask if everyone can have a look at that at some point over the meeting or in the break. Please could you, complete those, and I assume we're handing those in to Democratic Services, please. Right, so with that, are we good to go? Okay, so welcome everyone to this meeting of Full Council. The meeting is being live streamed on the Council's YouTube channel, so welcome to any of the members of the public who are watching. The recording of the meeting will remain online for 4 years. If you are present and making a representation to the meeting, you are consenting to this and the use of the recordings for broadcasting and training purposes. And please note that a fire alarm test is not expected, so if the alarm does sound, please make your way to the nearest exit. May I also remind members that the speaking limit is 3 minutes in debate, as we settled last time round. Very finally, to politely remind everyone to speak clearly and using the microphones. So, item 1 on our agenda is apologies. So I have apologies from Councillors Atherston, Chidley, Joy, Sankey and Tailford. I believe Councillor Oliver needs to leave early. Oh, there he is. Are there any other apologies? No. Okay, and then second item then is declarations of interest. I'll just start off by saying with the motion that we have today, because it's regarding the hospital and I'm a governor on the hospital's board, as part of the hospital trust, I think it wouldn't be appropriate for me to chair the meeting, even though it's not a pecuniary interest. So I will be handing over to Paul at that point. Councillor Baker at that point to chair the motion. Councillor Boyes.
Thank you. I've also got a declaration of interest for the motion as well. My husband's employed by the Gloucestershire Hospitals NHS Foundation Trust, but he's not directly linked with the commissioning of or the running of the maternity services, so I assume I can speak freely on that motion. Thanks.
Okay. Oh, sorry, Councillor.
And my daughter works for the same trust, so I have a non-pecuniary interest. But
okay, are there any other declarations? Yes.
I think this is a bit extreme. I drive a van for the Hospitals Trust one afternoon a week, which I don't think has got a huge relevance to maternity services. So I hope I am free to speak on that.
I think you're probably safe on that one, but thank you for raising it, absolutely. Okay, so item 3, minutes of the last meeting. So this is the meeting held on the 19th of June. Any comments or issues raised by any members? Okay, in that case, I'll invite you all to use the electronic voting just to note your approval, or otherwise, of course.
Yeah, that's everybody is carried.
Okay, and that is carried. 31 votes for, 2 abstentions. Right, item 4, communications by the Mayor. Other than I know Councillor Hay, as leader of the council, is going to be making a few announcements, so I didn't want to duplicate anything. So no announcements from me this time around. So moving on to item 5. Communications by the Leader of the Council.
You know, no briefings on all those happy photos of you as Mayor. Yeah. Okay, so, yeah, I've got a few that I'd like to just tell Council about. So, at this year's Local Government Association conference, CBC had a slot on in the Innovation Centre there, and it was my pleasure to introduce Sinum and Stroud High School and a company called Soprasteria to showcase how, as partners, we've been working to promote and educate young women in the cyber digital world as a career. And it was a well-received and attended session. And actually the video, if you get to see it at some point, is really engaging to see all these young women, young girls, actually really excited about participating. As part of our commitment to climate change, last week this authority gave £10,000 to Planet Cheltenham to support the installation of green energy equipment to support the creation of a much-needed new new community space in one of our less affluent wards. And many of you hopefully will know that on the 11th of July this year, Cabinet made the decision on the community infrastructure levy for the Neighbourhood Fund. That was an approval of £128,000. There were lots and lots of applications for that, and there were 16 projects across a geographical spread of our unparished areas. This funding stream is so important to our communities, and I'd like to thank the cross-party group of councillors who ably assisted the decision-making for the Cabinet to approve. At this year's Black History Month, together with our partners Care, children from across the borough were invited to write or draw a piece saying what it's like for them living in Cheltenham, and the winners will be heard at the Literature Festival, where it's hoped that 2 actors will assist our schools to perform and begin a discussion with those young people. I'd like to place on record my thanks, and I'm sure Council would support me in that, by saying that to all of those officers who work in our public protection team for the fantastic job they've done recently in dealing with the recent influx of travellers that we have had in Cheltenham. This is never an easy issue to deal with, but their interventions were swift, highly professional and effective. I'd also encourage all members to feed into the consultation on the proposed closure of our rail ticket office. It's quite an important one for those or in terms of our accessibility. Last week we had visitors from the LGA to conduct a corporate peer. They came in to conduct a corporate peer review. These are not an inspection, but a critical friend assessment. And I'd like to thank all of that team who came to Cheltenham. And that was, again, cross-party, because although the Liberal Democrats might be the biggest group, we're not the only group. So I was very keen that we had a Conservative peer as well that came and joined. And Simon was extremely nice. I'm sorry he was not able to stay for the Friday, but he had to get back for his own council meeting. I'd like to place on record my thanks to Freya for making sure everyone was where they needed to go and be, and for her organisation of it. But also thanks to Jane, Sue and Jill, along with many officers and members indeed, and partners who contributed. As it's my want, I will say it's great to be part of Team Cheltenham. We will be sharing the report with members when it is received. In the meantime, the presentation that was given to us on Friday for those that were able to be there was very much that the overall message, and I'm proud to say that we have very high quality officers and members with a clear sense of purpose, and it is well regarded by stakeholders and partners. That was just one little nugget in one of the paragraphs. Well, in fact, it was the first opening paragraph. So in terms of Cheltenham Borough Council, times are changing for some of our officers. Although Steve Mawson is not obviously one of our officers, we have worked very closely with him from the County Council, and it's thanks to him. He's played a significant part in working with us as a district, and I do hope this council will support me in wishing him well in his new post as Chief Executive Officer at Kirklees Council. Our very own unique Darren is taking up a Deputy Chief Exec's post in September this year. It does not seem like 5.5 years ago that I was part of that interview panel. Darren, your energy, I can read from the paper, but I'd rather talk to you. So your energy and your commitment and your tenacity to your approach to everything that you do, if you're given a task to do it, you will come back with a result. Whether it's a good one or a bad one, you will come back with a result, whether we like it or not. And I know we've got another couple of months of you with us, but this is the last council meeting, and I'm sure you would all want to wish and wish join with me saying thank you, congratulations and bon voyage, Aaron. So we have one other officer who's also leaving Cheltenham Borough Council. Mike Redmond's decided that after an awesome 35 years plus of service to Cheltenham, or to Cheltenham's residents and this council, it is time to move on to pastures new. Wherever or whatever that may be, perhaps just Mike might like to take a bit of time out. And again, I'm placing on record my thanks as leader of this council, and I'm positive that you will all support me in wishing him well. Thank you, Mayor.
Sorry. Thank you for that, Councillor Hay. Item 6, to receive petitions. I'm not aware of any. Does anyone have anything on that? No. Item 7 then is public questions. We have none received this time around. So item 8 is members' questions. So we have 4 of those. Question 1 is Councillor Took. Sorry, I should say. We'll take questions, original questions and answers as read. Hopefully that's okay with everyone. If anyone does really want to read anything out, then please indicate. Yeah, sorry, Councillor Took, did you have a supplementary?
Yes, I do. So in summary, it's not possible for Cheltenham to lose its spa status. What I find disappointing is that Councillor Fifield has chosen to spread rumours across national media which are unsupported by facts and so damage brand Cheltenham. My chief concern is that this politically
Sorry,
motivated...
one second, Councillor Took.
Sorry,
I appreciate you've raised a point of order. On what grounds is that, sorry?
So this is supplementary question to the Cabinet member, and he's making attacks on me that are false.
Okay, can I just stop you there? So just for a second, so there's no right to reply as such on questions, so I can't allow the point of order. I understand what you're saying now in terms of questions. Again, supplementaries are directly related to the original question and relatively brief, so if you could just bear that in mind, thank you.
I will. I just need to give some context to the question. So my concern is that this tittle-tattle will have an impact on our tourism industry. Tourism is key to this town, and I think it's irresponsible to undermine our businesses by spreading these rumours. My question is, and that's the context, please can you advise of steps that the council can take, if any, to counteract this irresponsible rumour mongering?
Sorry. I've appeared on the screen. Thank you to Councillor Took for his question. I think it's important that we get to set the record straight on this, and I was pleased to be able to visit Harrogate, another beautiful spa town, where the pictures that I took are appended to this answer, and I'm sure are clear for all members to see that you can't lose your spa town status. And the one I didn't append is this picture, which says plunge into the history of Harrogate Spa, holding it up there to the camera for those at home. So clearly Harrogate hasn't had spa water running in the traditional sense for more than a decade because it is dangerous, as the sign says, to consume, and yet the town is still marketed as a spa town. And I do think it's important for us just to be measured in the comments that we make, particularly if we're talking outside this meeting to the media, because it can have an impact on the brand of the town and our tourism, and particularly when we've seen in recent times local restaurants talking about the lack of support and help that there is available from the government to make sure that the hospitality industry can thrive in the way that it should be. And I'm sure that those who are making comments in the first place did so with the very best of intentions and didn't intend to cause such a fuss.
Okay, thank you for that. Just to reiterate on that one, whilst we don't have right to reply on questions and answers, I would just ask the questioners and the answer, depending on what is said, obviously, just to be mindful of that. But thank you for the answer, Councillor Wilkinson. Question 2 then is Councillor Harman. Did you have a supplementary?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, thank the Cabinet Member for his reply. I'm pleased you're looking at alternative solutions to help combat the gull menace, and it's something of great concern to residents. So I look forward to the outcome of that exercise. I just also noticed when I was in Bath, obviously they're in the conservation area, would he also look at appending signs or stickers to bins which say things like feed the bins and not the gulls? Because that is common practice elsewhere.
Thank you, Councillor Harman. I certainly will look at that, and I've seen indeed such signs elsewhere in my travels. And as I note in my reply, I have travelled literally from Uppsala to Ullswater and taken photographs. I have also been to Liverpool and seen the very exciting development there of bins which actually sink into the ground and then can be pulled out of the ground, which can be used for general waste, but also for recycling. And these are quite common in continental Europe, but they're starting to come into this country as well. And one of the advantages of these, other than the fact that they are enormous and can therefore be compacted, as you've indicated with the belly bins, and therefore much more efficient, they are also minimise the need for multiple recycling bins and bags and so on. And I know that's of concern to your fellow councillor, Councillor Nelson as well. So they have multiple advantages. So we're looking at both the opportunities to have better bins, and I hope I'm not precluding a supplementary here, to also to look at opportunities for other technologies to reduce the number of recycling bins and bags that we have on the streets of our town. So thank you. I'll do that.
Okay, question 3 is Councillor Nelson. Did you have a supplementary?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to the Cabinet Member for your very clear response. Funnily enough, this morning through my door came the very leaflet. So it's obviously working its way around the town as we speak. It's obviously taking a few weeks for it to get around. And it's very, very useful having all the bank holidays in, so thank you. My question is, on here it says that use one box for glass and another for paper. And in the answer to your the question, it says if space is available. But how will residents know that they can use just one box for the bottles on top of the paper when they've been told in this leaflet they must separate them into 2 separate boxes? How will you communicate that to residents, that in fact they can still use just one box for glass and paper? Thank you.
I thank you for your supplementary. I think on the leaflet we're trying to be as simple and as clear as possible, and in the reply you'll see that reasons for separation into particular boxes, different boxes, separate boxes. There are 2 main reasons, because it reduces the time for collection and indeed subsequent separation, reseparation at the household recycling centre. And it also improves the quality of the recyclate, because we do actually recycle through commercial companies, and they penalise us if the recyclate, which is the individual types of recyclable materials, is polluted by other types of recyclate. Unusual word, but that's the technical word. So we do prefer people to keep their recyclables separate. But you're right to say that in some circumstances, they can mix those 2 particular types of recyclate, and indeed my colleague on this side has also pointed that out to me. So perhaps we do need to be a little bit clearer on that. The reply could lead to a little bit of confusion. Can you leave that one with me, and I'll speak to my head of recycling. Thank you.
Okay, and question 4 is Councillor Nelson again. Do you have a supplementary? Okay, that concludes the questions. So on to item 9. So it's housing benefit war pensions disregard policy. And on that, I'll hand over to the Cabinet Member for Finance and Assets.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Colleagues, excuse me. Colleagues, this is one of the shortest reports and policies that I've seen come before Council, but undoubtedly one of the ones which I think is quite significant. The purpose of the report is to reconfirm that water disablement and war widowers' pension should be disregarded as income when calculating entitlement to housing benefit. Supporting those in our town who are in receipt of the disability pension and war widows' pensions who need housing support, in my view, is the right thing to do. You know, clearly, on such a low income, you'd like to think we'd like to give whatever support we can, and we do in other areas of the council business. Updating this policy and continuing the 100% disregard is the proposal for the updated policy. I commend the report to you, Mr Mayor, and happy to take any questions, colleagues.
Okay, so on that, do we have any questions? Nobody indicating. In that case, we'll move to the debate. Did anyone wish to speak on this item? Councillor Harman.
Just to say, Mr Mayor, fully support. We had before, excellent scheme, and we're totally behind it.
Okay, and if there's no one else indicating to speak, I guess I'll hand back to the Cabinet member who's declining the opportunity, but we'll move straight to the vote in that case. Thank you, councillors. That is unanimous. So, moving on to item 10. So this is the Financial Outturn report for 22-23. And again, we'll hand back to Councillor Jeffries for the Cabinet Member of Finance and Assets to introduce the report.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Colleagues, I'm pleased to present the Outturn report for the General Fund and HRA revenue and capital budgets for the financial year 2022-2023, which ended on the 31st of March. This shows the actual income and expenditure in the year against the revised budget figures approved here by the full council in February this year. Colleagues, I don't need to remind you of the last 12 months we've just experienced in terms of the economy, but like our residents and services, it has been, an economic roller coaster, I think you may describe it as. Not a ride I think any of us would have chosen to go on. This has brought us significant financial pressures. Since the original budget for 2022-23 was approved, inflation has increased from 5.1% to just over 11%, the highest in over 40 years, currently hovering around, I think, 7.9%. Interest rates have increased 10 times, with 2 further increases since we last discussed the budget 4 months ago. Energy prices have tripled and continue to remain high. These challenges have placed an unrelenting pressure on our costs and our resources, and at times, the rate of escalation of these pressures means we've barely been able to respond before the price increases again. The revised budget included these increased costs, and the approval from full council was to use our general balances to balance the budget. This was possible because the council received a sizable legal settlement in May of 2022. This was used to strengthen our general balances. The actual outturn position reports that 2.606 of the general balances was required, rather than the 2.505 budgeted. After earmarked reserves have been applied in the relevant service areas, this represents a £101,000 overspend against the revised budget. So we need to remain vigilant throughout 2023-2024, as general balances are finite and we cannot continue to rely on these year on year to balance our budget. The Outturn report reflects the importance of strengthening our reserves to bring our general balance levels to that of an optimum level, as recommended by our Section 151 officer. I therefore move the recommendations as laid out in the report, Mr Mayor. As we are accustomed to now, relevant cabinet members are on hand to ask specific portfolio questions needed, but I equally am happy to answer any questions members have. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Jeffries. So, any questions? I don't see anyone indicating, so if we move to the debate, do we have anyone who wishes to speak? And if there's nobody wishing to speak, I'll hand back to Councillor Jeffreys to sum up.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just like to put on record my thanks to the Finance and Assets team, who work incredibly hard on our behalf behind the scenes. What we see is a snapshot in time, but clearly you can see from the volume of paperwork the amount of work does go on. So put on record my thanks to the Finance and Assets team, Mr Mayor, and I commend the report to you.
And with that, we'll move to the vote. Yep, that's everyone. Thank you, councillors. That is unanimous. Okay, so moving on now to item 11, which is the disposal of the municipal offices. Again, I'll hand over to the Cabinet Member for Finance and Assets, Councillor Jeffreys.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Colleagues, this report before you is seeking your agreement to effectively put the for sale sign up on the municipal office building. I'm not sure my introduction to the report, as we discussed and decided to dispose of this building, can convey the significance of the decision we are potentially going to be taking. I say this because the Council's involvement in what is now one of our town's iconic buildings has been consistent for over 100 years. If the walls could talk, what stories they could tell. Now, as part of the Council's adopted strategic asset management strategy, it consistently reviews the performance of individual properties to establish whether the outputs being delivered meet the expectations or align with the wider corporate objectives of this authority. The rationale behind monitoring and continuous performance of our properties is to ensure that the Council secures the best financial and strategic returns from them and to deliver the greatest value for our residents in terms of outcomes or finances. Well, in relation to this building, the Council's shape and size has changed significantly over the austerity years. Studies have been undertaken during that time, and the number of CDC employees that need to be accommodated is considerably less. Also, let us not forget that in recent years, the pandemic has enabled further changes to the way this Council operates. The accelerated adoption of hybrid working really has confirmed that this Council's accommodation needs are not suited to this building. This has presented a timely opportunity to reflect on what the long-term purpose and use of the municipal office building is, and so it continues to play an active role in shaping a vibrant future for the town centre while enabling CBC to remain financially sustainable. Now, in progressing this issue, I'm particularly focused on collecting a range of views. Consultation had been undertaken internally with key partners, but for me, the critical voices that need listened to were those from outside of CBC. Bringing together representatives from across the town into a stakeholder group was very important. This group comprised of members from the Civic Society, the Local History Society, the Architects Panel, the Chamber of Commerce, the Business Improvement District, our voluntary and community sector, equally representatives from youth groups. Also had the pleasure of some of our younger apprentices attending. These organisations and representatives from across the town were invited to tour the building and discuss the council's situation, but more importantly express their opinions and views about this iconic building. At section 10 in the report, colleagues, you can read a summary of some of that feedback. Critically, we've also engaged Heritage England, and their representatives are keen to be involved as we move through this process, as are the stakeholder group. I'd like to put on record my thanks to all those organisations and individuals that have contributed to this conversation so far. Anyway, I'd like to draw your attention to the recommendations in the report, and they are to dispose of the municipal office building, commission a development brief, then invite bids for the development of this building, and then finally, a commitment to bring a report before this council for the final decision on the future of this iconic building. Thank you, Mr Mayor. I commend the report to you.
Sorry, can you just... Sorry. Thank you, Councillor Jeffreys. So, questions? Councillor Seacombe.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This is quite an emotive subject for several of us who've been here a long time. I can think of one other person in this room who's been here longer than I have. And it appears, the report appears to be directed towards selling this building and with no thought for the future. Now, some years ago, the council bought Delta Place, which I see in the report is now no longer considered usable as council offices. So I have two questions for the Cabinet member. Firstly, why is Delta Place no longer suitable, if that's prohibited information? And secondly, do you have any other building in mind to move to? Because you've got plan A, which is to sell the offices, but there's no plan B for a sort of strategically purposeful organisation to move on to. So perhaps you'd like to answer those two questions.
Thank you, Councillor Seacombe. But it's fair to say that the original discussion around Delta Place, you're quite correct, was that we would move there. I think that's been a very, very fortunate investment for this council. It's been almost fully let and at different times throughout its recent history. We have other office accommodation, Edinburgh House, for instance. But I wouldn't want to predict or have a plan A or B, as you call it, now, because it's going to take a significant period of time to shape the future for this building. The needs of the council may change again. Equally, what is available in the market in our own accommodation and properties we own may change as well. So, whilst we haven't got a plan B, as you put it, the first thing to work out is what's happening with plan A.
Okay, Councillor Harman, did you indicate a question?
I think I'll wait to the debate, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Fifield.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I just want to ask a question about the appendix item and the graph there about the cumulative annual cash flow by option. I just wanted to get an answer from the Cabinet member, if I could, whether the investments, so in the part and full refurbished metrics and all the lines, they don't include increases in value of the asset with the investment of doing a refurbishment. It'd be really useful for the debate to know that, if that was possible.
I'm going to have to look at officers for a potential answer. I can remember the discussion we had in some of the detailed conversation with Alice, but I can't give you 100% that it wasn't included or was included. So I need to direct to officers for that technical answer, if that's okay. Thank you.
Well, the answer to the specific question is that no, because obviously what this is doing is actually modelling the cash flow impact rather than the balance sheet valuation of any additional investment.
Again, it's quite hard, I'm putting you on the spot, but do you have any idea how much the asset may increase in value with the investments of those, or is it hard to answer?
Okay, well, at the point of making the investment, so if for example, this was valued at 10 million and we spent £20 million investment, that at the point of that investment, it would be a valuation of 30 million. We would then obviously have to do a formal valuation 12 months later for the statement of accounts, and it's very possible that that valuation could decrease significantly or indeed keep itself. But obviously local government finance is quite different to the private sector in so much that we don't allow for depreciation and things like that. So clearly if there was a revaluation downwards, it would be treated in our accounts as an impairment loss, but it wouldn't have any impact on the council taxpayer.
Okay, sorry, Councillor Jeffries, did you want to come back? No. Any further questions? If not, we'll move to debate. So do we have any speakers? I know Councillor Harman indicated just now. Councillor Harman.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think we all recognise that we need to make some change with the way the building operates, and we're in a different world, etc. But we're a bit uncomfortable in our group about the report to some extent, because it talks about the sale, but it doesn't analyse options. And it seems to me we might be selling it with something that we might at a later stage think wasn't entirely the right thing to do. So our argument may be not that you don't do it, but that it's the way you do it, and whether you put any safeguards. I think there are previous discussions on this subject, which actually is a topic that's been running for at least 50 years in my knowledge. And I seem to remember it being discussed when I was a Pimpley trainee committee clerk in the 1970s, and as well as the airport, which is ongoing then, is ongoing now, but there we are. Ideas were put forward for a joint venture, so we retain some interest. which would give you some control of what was happening, possibly retaining part of the building, civic entrance, which would give you a continuing town centre presence, disposing of parts of the rest of the building, either by leasehold or whatever, and perhaps retaining this area where the meeting rooms are. Now, we've got more questions than today we've got answers, and you're probably in the same position. I'm not saying you're not, but we are a bit concerned about where we're going. So I'm not quite happy with the moment about supporting it as it stands. That is not to say we wouldn't look at the process and contribute to that process, which we consider to be important for Cheltenham. The building is quite interesting because I think the facade is listed, which is the front. The rest of it isn't particularly. And it's a sort of building with a back and a front. The front is more attractive than the back, it's probably fair to say. So that's where we are at the moment, and I listen to arguments. Thank you.
Councillor Willingham.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In terms of heritage asset, as has been said, I think it's important that we remember that this is a listed building and the facade is listed. But I think reviewing what we have and whether this is still fit for purpose is important, and it sounds like it's been going on for many years. I think it probably has been going on so long that officers have borrowed from previous reports, because if you look on page 80, we talk about the Disability Discrimination Act, which was actually repealed in 2010 and replaced with the Equality Act 2010. So I think we need to look for a building that's, or state that the building is no longer Equality Act compliant, which is actually an important thing that we need to deal with. But I think it shows how long we've been thinking about this, that the report quotes legislation from 2010. It's also important that we collect the uses and the things that we can't necessarily replicate in other just bog standard offices. There are a lot of functions that the council does that probably are significantly different. So, for example, having an A0 plotter to print out plans for planning is probably something that not all offices would have. There are a lot of archive requirements that are going to be different, and I think it's really important that the council captures all of the special functions. You know, most offices don't have this type of meeting space, and certainly not one that has a mace at the front. So we've got to be careful with how we do that. But as I say, I'm not hugely wedded to necessarily keeping the building. It's where we go next. The thing about the disposal of the building, given its town centre location, is to be mindful of the agent of change principle. We're obviously in a town centre, and if, as per the government announcement today, there was a decision to change it to be housing, then the agent of change principle means that the building has to be, those living in the building have to not be subject to things like noise from outside, which in a town centre environment with a vibrant and a thriving and award-winning nighttime economy is a bit of a challenge. And I would ask us to work with planning, because maybe we will find a solution for other residents of ways of making noise insulation on windows something that can be done in listed buildings, conservation areas, etc. Because I think that is a struggle that this building will have, but it's a struggle that a lot of other residents across the town have. And if that is something positive that can come out of it, of challenging the planning department to find a way of making the whatever is here noise-proof, that would be a good thing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Willingham. Councillor Baker next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I think the recommendation is spot on, and I think the process that you've gone through to get here is to be congratulated. You are to be congratulated on. I think engagement with stakeholders was really, really important, whether it's a civil society or the bid or Chamber of Commerce or young people. Absolutely the right thing to do. This is not going to be an overnight decision, by any stretch of the imagination. And you would arguably say it's taken us quite a long time to get to this position. But we are at this position. And for me, it's a massively exciting opportunity for this council and for this town. This used to be a terrace of houses. Buildings throughout our country and our town evolve and change over time. And this is the time that this building needs to evolve and change. And I'm really excited that I might, subject to being re-elected next year, might be part of that process. So engagement is critical, both with councillors and of course, with the public. It is the right decision, and because we cannot just play around with this building and try and adapt it so that we can just keep this double chamber here. And you know, that just really reduces the value of the building. It needs to go lock, stock and barrel to a completely new use, to give a new owner an opportunity to do something which will be life-changing for our town. And of course, we have to lead by example. You know, we are an owner of this fantastic historic building, and we have to do the right thing by our town, by our heritage. And I am confident that we will do that. So I think it's the right approach. I would just pose some questions. I think there's no mention here about timings. And I think we want to get on with this. Having made this decision, if we are going to make this decision to sell it, let's crack on. Let's get this development brief put together as soon as possible with the maximum engagement of this council. Let's get out there and let's just see what exciting options come back to us. But let's get on with it and do it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Baker. Councillor Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I fully support that we should sell the municipal offices. I did back when we were likely to move into Delta House. But I think we're doing it the right way. Before you know what you can move into, you know what bag of gold you've got to buy it. It's like when you sell your house. I'd like to move into Battledown. I live in Forest of Dean now. But in the next former local housing association house. So you've got to look at the options, and that's what we're doing. You've got to be flexible, and you've got to look at the viable propositions. As regards the chamber, during the pandemic, we met in the pump rooms. Quite good, I thought. At the county, we met in a sports hall. Not very good, it was freezing cold. But there are lots of options for this building. I personally think it will end up as houses. You look in, when you've lived in Cheltenham for a long time, Royal Crescent at one time, not a single dwelling there. It was all offices. Now, there are private houses there. Same with Imperial Square. I remember the Echo reporting the last residential property in the promenade. We've got several now. We've got properties over the coffee bar, which used to be Dobell's. I prefer it as Dobell's. But, and things like that. We've got to look at the options, and we've got to look at the best value for the people who elect us, because that's what we're charged to do. We need to get the best value for the people of this town. And there will be compromises. If you know, it's like most of these properties, it's like Blackpool. It's that gone off? I don't know. It's absolute, all these properties. You look at the back of Royal Crescent, you look at the back of Lansdowne, and all properties, it is very much about the frontage. I'm sure there's good development opportunities with the rear of the property, which would enhance it. It's not going to be a loss to the town, it's going to be an asset. And it's going to be an asset to the people of Cheltenham financially.
Thank you. Councillor Horwood.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to strongly support this report and really commend the approach that Councillor Jeffreys has taken to this. I think the sequencing is exactly right. To move from vision and through engagement-led discussions to a development brief and only then to sale, I think is exactly right. But I want to reassure members, and Councillor Willingham mentioned planning, that in addition to that, we already have a planning policy in place, MD3, in our 2020 local plan, which refers specifically to Royal Well and the municipal offices, and very clearly says, I mean, it actually flags up the potential sale. It says the municipal offices are currently in use as council offices, but there is the possibility of those existing uses being relocated and redesigned. And actually, the way councils have evolved, that's clearly right, because we are, I mean, you only have to walk around these offices during the working week to know that we are rattling around with many empty and hugely underused spaces in this building, and we need to move somewhere more modern and more flexible. But this policy quite specifically says that any future development will follow a layout and form that respects the character, significance and setting of the conservation area and all the other impacted heritage assets, most notably this building itself, which is Grade 2 star listed. So there are massive planning protections to this whole environment and to this building in particular. And I think, therefore, the very pragmatic pathway that Councillor Jeffries has set out is exactly the right one. Councillor Seacombe said we had no plan B. Well, we're not really looking for a plan B. This is plan A. And plan A will also involve us finding a more flexible and modern space to move into, which I think is a great opportunity, actually. I mean, there are many people with a lot of affection for this chamber, although it's not an original part of the building. These were not built as council offices, these buildings. But if you imagine a space that could perhaps have multiple uses, could be, you know, a small music or public space venue, but which we occupied when council meetings took place on a flexible basis, had better disabled access, was more environmentally and economically efficient, both for the council and therefore for the local taxpayer. I think there are huge opportunities. And I think we shouldn't be worrying about plan B at this stage. I think Councillor Jeffries has set out plan A and we should support it. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, and Councillor Hay.
Thank you, Mayor. I think I haven't been here probably quite as long as Tim, but I've been around a while. But I certainly remember when back in the early 2000s, we had something, actually it was around about 950 staff working and operating out of this building. I mean, since then, the Trust, Ubico, CBH has all happened. We're now about 200 staff, there or thereabouts. And we occupy, at maximum, 25% of this building. But we are custodians of the entire listed building. And I think it's a magical opportunity that we've got to actually put all these buildings back on the map in terms of being actually properly used and properly loved. I'm not saying the council that we don't look after it, but actually what it needs to be is brought back into the whole mix of Cheltenham and Cheltenham's place. And the peer review that we've just had actually talks about, as one of the potential improvement areas, is that we actually think about our place. And I know when I did a bit of a double act with one of our officers recently with BBC Radio Gloucestershire, it makes you, actually having radio interview doing it, you have to bring it to life. So going through the building and bringing different parts of it back to life just really made me realise that it's an amazing opportunity that we've got. And I think somewhere along the line we've got a little bit hooked up on where we will go, because that's not the primary importance to me. The primary importance for me is making this building work for the people of Cheltenham. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hay. Councillor Fifield.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, what I don't really understand is why this there's sort of an approach here to take options off the table that don't need to be taken off the table. And I think that's why I have a real issue with supporting the motion. I can understand that there's been major changes in technology, hybrid working, those sorts of things. Fundamentally, I don't think it answers the question of why we, as a council that are convening here today, need to move. I still don't really understand why we have to force ourselves to sell the entire plot, and we can't look at alternatives where maybe we resell some office spaces, create some abodes from flats, create flats from parts of the municipal building as a whole. I do think there's also a thing that we haven't really touched on. I think Councillor Jeffries did touch on it, that there is definitely an element of civic pride. Now, as one of the younger members of the council, for me, when I was first elected here and I came through the front door, I felt a real sense of pride, a real sense of being a centre of Cheltenham's democracy. And I do think that that argument hasn't really been articulated in terms of we don't even know what alternative arrangement might be made, and we haven't really made an answer or even suggested that we might want to talk to the public as a whole. Would we consider possibly doing a consultation with how people in Cheltenham actually feel about this change? There's no doubt that publicly this has the perception of being a central asset, not just in terms of finances, but emotionally and culturally. And for that reason, and for the sort of more questions, as Councillor Harman said, there are more questions in this paper than answers. I definitely won't be able to support the paper.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Fifield. Councillor Barnes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm probably one of the oldest inhabitants of this building, or certainly the longest surviving member of the building. And when this first came up as an option, my first reaction was over my dead body, because this building is so important to the town, it's so important to our democracy. It's such a huge responsibility, and we as a council have that responsibility to make sure that what we do with this building is right, purposeful, and will be long-lasting for our future generations. I've moved on slightly from my over my dead body view. Hopefully that won't be too soon, but I think this building has served its purpose now, and we need to move on. We need to see a different aspect to our democracy in town. What worries me slightly, I'm not really that concerned about the future of the building, because I know we'll have it in good hands. We'll make sure that it doesn't get wasted and misused. But what I am worried about is that this has been the centre of the town for so long, to so many people, and I think our users, outside users, not our internal users, I mean, I do appreciate they need good quality buildings to work in, and good offices and good facilities. But this is a building that represents democracy for the whole town. And I think people need to know that they can come to the centre of the town. I'm glad Delta site has gone, because I didn't see that as being a viable option for people coming in on the bus and having to traipse across town to have talk to somebody in the offices. So I hope, and I know Plan B, as it's being called, is not on the cards at the moment, but I hope when we do get to that point that we do consider the rights of our public to be able to come to somewhere central and have their democracy used properly. So I'm confident that we're going down the right path at the moment, but I just have some concerns about the future, and I think we all probably do that.
Thank you, Councillor Barnes. Councillor Flynn.
Thank you. I recall a commitment many years ago to keep the Muni in the ownership of Cheltenham Borough Council on the basis that it belongs to the town and to Cheltenham residents, that it wasn't ours to sell off. I'm disappointed that that commitment has been abandoned. Part 5 of the report says, on page 4, the report says, given the council's ambitious corporate plan, the council does not have the in-house capacity to explore a joint venture opportunity for redevelopment and therefore is recommending an outright disposal. But the development of the Muni predates the other projects in the corporate plan, and it should have been moved forward a long time ago. I don't like the reference in the report to the urban footprint, the carbon footprint. I'm not sure offloading assets that get in the way of achieving net zero and making them someone else's problem fully embraces the point of setting them. Whether we stay here or not, I do think this building should remain in council ownership. Thank you.
Okay, I don't have any other members indicating to speak, so I'll hand back to Councillor Jeffreys.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I wasn't wrong when I said there'd be a range of views and opinions. I'm grateful for all of them, negative and positive, because I think they all contribute to the debate. It's a tough one, isn't it? There's been conversations going on for decades about this building, but we have to find a way forward. I think what we can't be is prescriptive. I think we need to be a bit more open. We have been open with our residents, and the leader reminded me, and thank you, leader, in the last resident survey, where there was a question, particularly about the future of the council. I think it was actually a subject of an election debate at one point amongst some candidates, and has been several times. So I appreciate the members will have more questions than they've got answers, but I think we need to ask the questions first. I'm very clear. This building is for the betterment of the town. So solving the issue about the future of this building first is where and foremost where my attention needs to lie. I'm also very clear that us, the council, need a home, and at some point along that journey, we'll undoubtedly have more conversations about the future home for the council. So I have to recommend the report to you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much.
Okay, and with that, we will move to the vote. So we have 4 recommendations. Please indicate on your on the control panels. Okay, thank you, councillors. That recommendation is carried with 27 votes in favour, 7 against. So we now move on to item 12, and if you can just bear with us a moment whilst we swap the chair, we'll be with you in a second.
Okay, so we have one motion to consider. I'd like to invite Councillor Graham Beale to introduce the motion. Graham, you have up to 10 minutes to address us. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'd like to propose a motion. In 2011, a study from the University of Virginia found that of men and women who wore seatbelts, women were 50% more likely to be seriously or fatally injured in a car crash. Indeed, a few years later, a follow-up survey revised this figure. Serious injury or death for female car crash victims is 75% higher than for males. You might ask, why was this? The answer was that up until the year 2000, crash test dummies used in the motor industry to simulate and gather crash test data were based on the average male. Not only this, but when they realised the gap, it would take 20 to 30 years of biomechanical research and testing to build a crash test dummy for alternative body types. Mr. Mayor, you might think that in modern times this neglect for women could never happen again. However, I'm afraid to report it's an example of the only tip of the iceberg. 10 years ago, I became a dad for the first time. My wife had experienced challenging pregnancy, so the choices we made became critical to the way we managed the uncertainty of birth. During this time, my eyes were opened to how little support other women received during and after childbirth. By the nature of the situation, women can become isolated, feel alone, at a time when they need the most support. 1 in 3 women report trauma following the birth of their child, an area where, again, there is very little scientific research. This trauma can have a life-changing impact, causing flashbacks, nightmares, anxiety, and depression. Yet, with timely intervention and support, these impacts can be greatly reduced, even reversed. So I'd like to draw your attention to the Avita Birthing Unit, a midwife-led facility based here in Cheltenham, the place where my eldest daughter was born. They offer a number of en-suite birthing rooms designed to support active natural labour. Each one has a birthing pool and an aromatherapy service. Women are offered a one-on-one care from a midwife so they feel at home. The midwives are trained to provide pain relief through gas and air, and once the labour is over, women don't have to move wards. Women and their birthing partners are given the time and space to get to know their baby. At Avita, I witnessed this incredible support afforded to me and my wife during the birth of my eldest daughter. Not only did they support my wife right up to birth, but after birth, making it very clear that the door was always open during those critical few days and weeks. During the first week, we suffered a long list of complications, which as new parents, we were utterly unprepared for. The kind, supportive midwives at the Avita Birthing Unit encouraged us to come back to their suites and stay overnight until we felt comfortable enough to return home. Mr. Deputy Mayor, I'm sad to report this critical facility for women and their families has been closed for births for over a year. More so, the reopening has been delayed once again due to staff shortages. Make no mistake, the loss of this service has severely impacted families across Cheltenham. Thankfully, in the UK, the great majority of births are successful. However, this is not the full story. Should our local birthing unit permanently close, this would be a tragic loss to women's birthing choices in Cheltenham. Supporting women and families through childbirth is, to my mind, not only a critical service, but a moral duty to set families up for success. So I urge the Cabinet member responsible to offer a clear and permanent commitment to the Avita Birthing Unit here in Cheltenham. Mr. Mayor, I ask you to support the women of Cheltenham at a time when they need it most.
Thank you, Councillor Beale. Councillor Horde, do you want to second now and speak? Yep. Okay, thank you. You have up to 5 minutes. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. And I'm delighted to second this motion today. I was born in Cheltenham, and I am so old that means I was born in the St Paul's Maternity Hospital when it was in St Paul's. My kids were born in what was still called the St Paul's Maternity Ward, but had by then moved to Cheltenham General Hospital in 2001 and 2004. And in 2006, I was very privileged as the MP to join with the NHS trade unions. Yes, MPs and trade unions used to work together. And with, indeed, actually, with the then Conservative parliamentary candidate, Vanessa Gerson, to run a cross-party campaign to save that maternity unit when it was threatened with outright closure. And the campaign was called Cheltenham Maternity Matters, hence the title for this motion. And it was a great campaign, and it succeeded, and we, as a result, have the outstanding service now called Avita, which Councillor Beale very eloquently just described. But it is, of course, a worry that right now, the vast majority of Cheltenham mums are not giving birth to children who will be able to say, I was born in Cheltenham, because since last year, that unit has been closed. The closure or the reopening date has sort of drifted back to this October, and we may hear during this debate more news about when it is likely, if ever, to reopen. And I say if ever because there is a concern here that the kind of practical workforce and budgetary issues that are being discussed in relation to the birthing unit have previously been discussed in relation to a Type 1 A&E, which we lost on an apparently temporary basis, but then lost altogether, and is now not a Type 1 A&E, but a part-time A&E and minor injuries unit out of hours. We lost general surgery due to similar pressures. We lost Battledown Children's Ward, and before that, the neonatal care unit, all with similar kind of discussions. And there is this phrase being used by the local NHS that this is not only a temporary closure, but that there will be a further review coming down the track. So it is a real concern. And we know some of the reasons for this. We know that the government has utterly mismanaged NHS workforce planning over the last decade or so, that many of the sort of workforce planning, recruitment and retention issues affect the whole NHS, not just Cheltenham and Gloucestershire, and that these have been exacerbated by Brexit, which again was pushed through without regard for the damage it would do to the NHS. Nevertheless, we feel it is very important to put on record in this council that we want an unambiguous commitment to the retention of this really valuable local service, and we want the local NHS services to do the absolute maximum to protect its long-term future, and we seek that reassurance from the clinical commissioning group and the local board that now brings together all NHS services.
Now there is Horwood, your 3 minutes is...
5.
Oh, 5. I apologise.
Thought my timing was off for a minute there.
Take your time, Martin. Take your time.
There is the reassurance that the NHS Trust has announced a 2.7 million investment in maintaining the service, as you do have to from time to time in services like these. But of course, there is potentially, if this closure continues, presumably some risk to that investment, or some risk that that investment might be redirected to another site, and that this might be part and parcel of this further review. So we believe it is very important to put on the record what this council believes, and I hope it will have unanimous support, to say that we want this fantastic local service for local mums and local families and local kids, so that generations in the future will continue to be able to say, I was born in Cheltenham. Thank you.
Thank you. My apologies for interrupting you. Okay, so we're open to debate. Members have up to 3 minutes to speak. Councillor Boyes.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'd like to thank Councillor Beale for this thorough, incredibly well-written and necessary motion. The issues highlighted speak for themselves. However, there are a few things I would like to share briefly in support of this motion. When I moved to Cheltenham 12 years ago, I was 8 months pregnant and incredibly lucky to give birth to my daughter in the birthing unit at Cheltenham General, and it was a joy. It was as relaxing as an experience as it possibly could be, and as much as I could have hoped for. The professionalism of the staff was exemplary. The unit itself is an asset to Cheltenham. It was clean, spacious, everything that you mentioned, Councillor Beale, and everything you'd want for a natural birth. It saddens me, though, to think that since June 2022, women in Cheltenham have missed out on the opportunity to give birth at this fantastic facility in the town where they live. This government are severely depriving women in Cheltenham of this wonderful service due to their severe mismanagement of workforce planning. It's an utter disgrace, really. Women in Cheltenham deserve better than this. We have this excellent facility sitting at the heart of Cheltenham, unused due to government neglect and underinvestment in the NHS and the effects of a deeply damaging exit from the EU. These 12 years of neglect have led to women being deprived of this valuable local service. Furthermore, colleagues may not be aware, but last year the Care Quality Commission carried out an inspection when they told Gloucestershire Hospital's NHS Foundation Trust to make immediate improvements to maternity services, and the overall rating was moved from good to inadequate. Whilst they understood the immense pressures on NHS staff and how hard they are working, they saw the impact that workforce shortages are having on both patients and staff. Staff across the service said they were exhausted and morale was low. Gloucestershire is not alone. The crisis facing maternity services is evident across the country, in particular due to the long-standing staffing shortages caused by a lack of workforce planning by this government and our deeply damaging exit. The sector wrote to the government last September to call for action and have seen little evidence. We need long-term solutions and a long-term plan, and we need it urgently. The families of Cheltenham deserve better than this.
Thank you, Councillor Boyes. I have Councillor Bamford, and then Councillor Clucas, and then Councillor Fisher.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Having to close the Avita birthing unit as well as the unit in Stroud is something that I'm sure nobody working in the healthcare world is comfortable with. With over 30 whole-time equivalent vacancies, that's 14% of the total workforce, and those figures are still on an upward trajectory. The Hospitals Trust has little alternative than to focus on the hospital service at Gloucester Royal and the home birthing team if it's to achieve its key quality standard and safety standard of having a midwife present at each birth. Sadly, this is not an abnormal situation in today's NHS. These sorts of incredibly high vacancy rates are common throughout many of the key healthcare professions, as well as in many of the very poorly paid ancillary staff. This crisis has been looming for over a decade, and government has been asleep at the wheel. Year on year below inflation pay awards, pay rates falling well below comparable private sector jobs, skyrocketing demand and ever higher public expectations. At last, we have a recently published workforce plan with many fine words in it. But without a radical transformation in pay and conditions, the idea that an army of homegrown Britons are going to get trained up and step in to fill the breach is, I'm afraid, laughable. Look, I really hope that the Hospital Trust is successful in its many recruitment campaigns, and that it is also successful in its current attempt to skill mix the service, the midwifery service, so that non-midwifery staff are able to pick up enough tasks currently performed by midwives that it can safely reopen Avita, probably after the £2.7 million investment that it's got for it, and Stroud, for local mums again to deliver in both those areas. But what we really need is a change of government as soon as possible to one that is truly committed to the NHS. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rampert. Councillor Clucas.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Well, ladies and gentlemen, can I thank those of you who've already spoken, particularly our gentlemen friends, because I actually think it's really important. Some of the things that you said, Graham, that you have said, come from men, not just from women. And the reason you laid out very, very clearly, it's because unless we have men speaking with us at our side, frankly, women are far too often ignored. And that needs to be said. And what are we looking at here? We're looking at need. We're looking at location. We're looking at opportunity. We're looking at potential. And what we're seeing is wholly different. What we're seeing is 12 months ago, maybe a little bit more, a unit which was deemed to be a really good unit, shut. And why? We can't get the staff. And because we can't get the staff, then the unit is closing. And we'll look at it again, honestly, we'll look at it again, and it will open, won't it? Well, ladies and gentlemen, I have to tell you, given what we have seen in relation to hospital management in Gloucestershire over the last few years, my bet is the only way we are going to get that back is to fight for it. To fight for it. And I'm glad to see the guys are up for the fight. Let's go, fellas. Because what we need is an understanding of what we face. So what do we face? We face women not just from Cheltenham, not just from Stroud, but from the entire county having one hospital that can cope with real serious emergencies at birth. That's what we're facing. So if you live in the Forest of Dean, where'd you go? If you live in Cotswold, where'd you go? I'll tell you where you go. You have to go to Gloucestershire, if that's what's required, to Gloucester. And if that is the case, then what you're doing is creating further problems right across the county. And what about here in Cheltenham? Well, it was interesting because when the unit was closed, we were told, yes, it's going to be fine, yes, we're going to have a look at it again in a short time. And it's been reviewed. And we were told the Hospitals Trust has managed to get hold of 2.7 million to invest. But you know what? That isn't guaranteed for this unit. And looking at what's happened in previous realignments of hospital services, my bet is it will not go to Cheltenham, that it will go to Gloucester Royal, because that 2 million will make a hell of a difference there. So, we've looked at closure, we've looked at money.
Councillor Lucas, can you
Yes,
bring your remarks to a close?
I will do that now. And what we're seeing in this whole mess of organisation that has become the Hospitals Trust is a desire simply to tick the box and ignore the reality. And you can do that for just so long before, frankly, people start to die. And in Gloucestershire, we have seen that in our hospitals. People waiting to be admitted and dying in ambulances. We've seen it. And my fear, Deputy Mayor, my fear, colleagues, is that what we're going to see in our town before too long is people who are not going to be able to get the nursing, the medical assistance they need. They have to go to Gloucester, and between the two, you're then looking at delay, and not enough staff. And this really has to be opened up to the public. It has to be something that we fight
very
with.
generous.
Indeed, I shall do that now, Deputy Mayor. It has to be something that we fight to retain. So I hope, colleagues, that together we will do that and we will make the difference. And thank you, Deputy Mayor, for your patience. I do understand I do have a limit. Thank you, colleagues. Let's get to this. And I tell you what, let's fight to keep it, shall we?
Yes.
I'm not brave enough to cut you off in midstream, Councillor Grigas. Okay, Councillor Fisher.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I was born in Cheltenham before the National Health Service in a private maternity unit in 1943. My children were born in St Paul's, a former workhouse. But if it wasn't for the one-to-one in St Paul's, my daughter would not be alive today. She had complications and we nearly lost her. My son was born there with no problems. My grandchildren, because they were born in Greater London, were born at home because they had no facilities around there. This town, since I was born, has grown. The population has grown. What hasn't grown is the service for the oldest thing in the medical book, which is childbirth. And we haven't got a facility in a town of this size. It's not wrong, it's a scandal. It is nonsense. Our death at birth rate in this country is not good compared with other countries. We must give these people a facility that is of the quality that we expect in the 21st century. It is ridiculous. And as Councillor Lucas said, it's the men. I was married for 10 years before a child came along, and I saw men who wife gave birth, and they all went a bit soft and things like that, and never came down to the pub. And when it happened to me, I went exactly the same way. Nothing more precious in life than your children, and to be there and to make sure that they start off life well. And we've got to support this. It is fundamental. It's the gift of life. And I've appreciated it for myself and for my family, and long may it continue in Cheltenham.
Thank you, Councillor Fisher. Councillor Harman.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. A few points on this. I mean, I was born in Cheltenham, St Paul's Hospital as well, a long time ago, in a snowdrift apparently, and Mother had to walk there because the ambulance got stuck in the snow. So I've been causing trouble ever since. But I'd say to you that the spirit of this we absolutely support, and it's really good news that there is additional money coming. I think what I have problems with the motion is a bit woolly. I mean, there isn't really much of a conclusion to it. would it not be the appropriate thing for the motion to be referred with the support of this council to HOSC, the Health Overview and Scrutiny Committee, which has the scrutiny function, upon which Councillor Bamford is your representative when he's not driving a van. And alternatively, and the health service has many challenges, and we've had some really good news, not just about this, but other investment in hospitals recently. When I was chairman of ONS, I managed to get the then chief executive of the NHS Trust Hospitals to come and talk to us about A&E. I was told they wouldn't come and talk to you. They did. That might be an option to look at. So at the moment, it's all a bit woolly, not against the spirit of it, and I should ignore some political knockabout, because perhaps when we're talking about these issues, we should be more focused than just have something because of the election coming. So I would be prepared to support the motion, but I do so with more enthusiasm if you have a better conclusion with a practical outcome.
Thank you. And I suppose you could always move an amendment if you were so wished. Councillor Collins.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'll start off by saying I fully support this motion, but I think it's really, really sad that we've had to bring it to council. I was born in Cheltenham too, so add me to the list. I'm a Cheltonian and very, very proud of that. In fact, I was born in my mum and dad's back bedroom, so I didn't get the pleasure of going. Not that I don't know anything about it. I didn't get to go to a hospital. Also, I have been present at quite a few births myself. I did have a minor role. In fact, I remember being left in charge of the gas and air, much to my ex-wife's disgust. But anyway, I will make a serious point. I used to have a house in the Forest of Dean, and it's very, very important where you're born and where your children are born. And it's very, very important in the Forest of Dean. You've got to be a forester. And to win that accolade, you've got to be born within the 5 parishes. So when the Forest of Dean lost their Dilk Hospital, it meant there were not going to be any more foresters born. Seriously. So it led to something quite dangerous as a result, because what mums would do when they went into labour is they delay calling the midwife in the hope that they would be so far gone by the time medical support arrived that they would have to have their child at home, in the house, or in the back of an ambulance outside the house, which, well, although really, really unwise, because if there were any complications, it could cause all sorts of problems, even the loss of the baby. But it was so important to those people that their child was born within the Forest of Dean. And, I can see why it's so important. I was lucky enough to be born in Cheltenham. My children weren't, unfortunately. They had to go to Gloucester. And most of you know my opinion of Gloucester when it's compared to Cheltenham. But I just think that that's a really, really important point to make. The place of birth, it goes on your birth certificate. It's there for the rest of your life. And it means something. It means something to everybody. It certainly means something to me. So I fully support this motion.
Thank you. Councillor Nelson.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I too was born in Cheltenham in a back bedroom, and I had my 2 babies in St Paul's. Brilliant. I certainly support the principle of the motion, but like my colleague, I do worry it's rather over-politicised, and we shouldn't be politicising the birth of babies. We should, as Councillor Kluker says, we should all be working together to get this facility reopened. I would ask Councillor Beale on his the clarification of one of his paragraphs. I believe the hospital said the main reason for the temporary closure is due to long-term absence rather than any of these other reasons. And the hospital has already said clearly this is a temporary measure. Services will be restored when enough staff return. We have a new head of the NHS Trust in Gloucestershire, thank goodness. So I think I share Councillor Harmer's suggestion. Get it to scrutiny, whether it be HOSC or ONS. Give this new boss a chance. And I agree, we should all be lobbying, all of us, not just one person sending a letter, to get, as Councillor Kluker said, get behind them and get that unit reopened as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pingo.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So I feel like I've been here before, because when our eldest son was born,
they closed down in Manchester. They closed down the excellent local unit and moved all births in South Manchester to Wythenshawe Hospital. It didn't go so well. We were told to go. We were fine to go home the next day. We went home, and the child was subsequently quite ill. We called them up. They said, "Well, if it's not, get some rest while the baby's sleeping," sort of thing. And we're like, "Oh no, this isn't right." And we eventually managed to get back into the Wythenshawe Hospital, where they closed down the unit, but they wouldn't take us back at, sorry, Withington Hospital. They wouldn't take us back at Wythenshawe. So there were complications. And I won't connect that. But anyway, the point is that when there are complications and you're at a major unit like Gloucester and you're not allowed to go back on that ward, the children can develop sort of disabilities that are lifelong, and that it's so actually it's a false economy. If you're going to move people to another hospital, it's a false economy because society is going to pay for the rest of their life for that, for any difficulties that come about. And I know it's anecdotal, but I just wanted to add it to the debate. Thank you.
Okay, next I have Councillor Payne.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. It might well be assumed that as a mere man, my involvement with maternity services is somewhat limited. Far from it. As a practicing radiographer in the 1980s, I was called out night after night to x-ray pregnant women before they gave birth, to assess the size of the pelvic outlet. And I came to a rather warped conclusion that the time of birth, as I was called out very often at night, I came to the conclusion that the time of conception seemed to coincide with the time of birth to inconvenience me. I'm pleased to say that since those days we've moved on. Technology has helped considerably in reducing abnormalities and problems in pregnancy. It's my intention to support this motion because I think it's comprehensive and it is well researched. As I've said, maternity services have moved on, but regrettably, in this country, they are still in a poor state. If according to the Cumberbridge report, 7% of maternity hospital units are rated as inadequate. 41% require improvements. Things have moved on, but COVID, industrial action, financial crisis, Brexit, has impacted adversely on resource. The report sets out 5 ambitions for maternity. Safer units, more professional, kinder, and family-friendly, and more personalised. In any care environment, delivering first-class care is a result of properly integrated team, where professionals communicate for the benefit of patients. Where there are barriers, quality of care suffers, often to the detriment of the patient. In a survey report presented in the Cumberbridge report, a study of stillbirths reveals 51% had one element of care that had been missed. Unfortunately, we in this chamber are not
in a position to change maternity care. But we should encourage Gloucestershire NHS Trust to encourage team building in maternity and other departments, with trust directors, including clinical and nursing leads, to begin the process of team building.
Councillor Payne, can you bring your remarks to a close?
I would encourage the Trust to reopen the maternity unit at Cheltenham General, but only if it can be opened with an integrated care team. Finally, Mr Deputy Mayor, as a mere man, I cannot begin to appreciate the joy and the little discomfort that bringing life into the world. But this council has the opportunity to start that process in making the experience safer.
Thank you, Councillor Payne. Councillor Jeffries, then Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. Now, I wasn't going to say anything, but I feel obliged to at some point, but I think I've got to start with the fact that I wasn't born in Cheltenham, first of all. I was an orphan. I was apparently born in Bath, so I used to tell family and friends or whoever in my youth that I popped out the plug hole. My children, however, all three of them have been born in Cheltenham. One of them, I know for certainty, would not have been born in Cheltenham had the birthing unit been in Gloucester. I know that for a fact. I hardly made it down Kencham Road before and into the car park before she arrived. So I just want to join my voice with colleagues that are supporting it through either experience, statistics, facts and evidence. And I want to take umbrage, because I really can't sit here and not mention the fact that everything that we see as wrong with our services is down to one thing I want to learn: mismanagement. I didn't raise this, and I wasn't going to raise this, but some members mentioned politicising and politics, hence why I thought I'd better add my voice to that. This government is absolutely bloody useless. Oh, my apologies, members, I've sworn in the chamber, so I do apologise. Very stoked with passion. But they are useless. They'll try and blame anything they can on whatever it is, rather than taking responsibility for the management of the services for us, the public. What are we going to see next disappear? We've seen it all slowly just disappear. And we can critique the Trust on how they manage their budgets and how they manage the situation, and rightly so. But actually, I mean, what was the last figure, I think, of the NHS increases that this government floated around? They'd invested so many billions, when actually what it was just writing off the COVID money onto it. It's shocking dereliction of duty. So when members in this chamber use the word politicised and elections coming, I take umbrage at that. Because actually this was quite a softly, I was hoping to be fully supported motion around care for, newborns in our town and the young ladies that go there and the families that go there. This government is a shambles, and this is another example of a shambles of how this government treats us. Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor.
Thank you.
He's been given notice of a potential.
So Councillor Harman has indicated he wants to put an amendment. What I'm going to do is take the remaining speakers on the motion, and then I'll ask Councillor Harman to propose his amendment. So I now have Councillor Harvey, then Councillor Took, and then Councillor Clark, and then we'll hear from Councillor Harman.
Deputy Mayor, thank you. And as an employee of the Gloucestershire Health and Care NHS Foundation Trust, which is not related to the NHS Hospitals Trust, Cheltenham and Gloucester, you have to resign from one to go and work in the other. You can't just transfer, because the National Health Service is stovepipe like that. I'm mindful of my daughter's employment that I vowed earlier as being part of the NHS Hospitals Trust. She's actually a maternity care assistant on the unit at Gloucester Royal. So I'm going to look very carefully at the monitoring officer when I make my remarks. Olivia got up this morning at 6, left for work at 6:30, started at 7. She's there now. We'll probably be in the pub enjoying a beer after this meeting. She doesn't finish till 8. So I tip my hat off to every single person that works in the NHS, but in particularly maternity care services in this county, because they're on their knees and they're working long hours. In terms of the comment that our esteemed colleague, Councillor Nelson, mentioned about the HOSC, and I've heard this before. I was the HOSC representative for this borough for 2 years, and I've heard it from one side of the chamber. Don't need to do a motion, don't need to do a motion. Get your representative from the HOSC to go and take it to the County Council. The County Council that is dominated by the party opposite, and we are one voice. This council is 40 councillors representing the people of Cheltenham. We can do this motion, we can support the birthing unit at Cheltenham General be restored by the motion. And we can invite our HOSC representative to go to the HOSC and fight our corner there. Something which, of course, I know from experience, has not happened in the past with HOSC representatives from this council who voted against the A&E remaining as a Type 1 functioning consultant-led unit. So it's not about politicising children. What this debate and what this motion is about is having the voice of Cheltenham heard and understood at the other end of the Golden Valley. That at the moment, you can't be born a Cheltonian. Our own Max has gone, but his daughter was born in Gloucester. She's not a Cheltonian. I wasn't born here. I did have my tonsils taken out at the Battledown Children's Hospital before Churchill died. And both my daughters were born in the St Paul's maternity ward at the General. And they were both born by C-section, which couldn't happen today, even with a birthing unit, because there's no consultant to do C-sections. So it's not about politicising birth. It is about being one voice to the integrated commissioning board, as it is now, saying, Cheltenham, thank you very much, we would like our maternity services restored as part of the 2.7 million, and we can still go via our representative to support our corner and raise that. So I fully support this motion for the obvious reasons I've just stated. Thank you, Mayor. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Councillor Took.
I wasn't born here either. I was born in Ipswich for my sins.
Somebody had to be.
I do find Councillor Nelson's comments extraordinary. This is deeply political. What we're talking about is the result of the underfunding of the NHS paying people decent wages over the last 13 years. Now, I know it's inconvenient for the local Conservatives that it's the Conservative Party that has driven these policies, but it is their party. They cannot distance themselves from this. It's down to them. So this is political. They hold some responsibility for it because it's the party of which they're a part which has done this. And I support the motion fully, and I support it because it is political, and we should be making a political statement.
Thank you, Councillor Took. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. I'm putting this on public record. I respect all of you enormously for your intelligence and sharp minds. You haven't got a clue what this compares to on the continent. Because of Brexit, we have less staff. I had 2 children in Belgium. You haven't an idea how much better maternity services are there. I had a physiotherapist who made me exercise and forbade me to eat any summer fruits because I was not allowed to put on more than 53, to have a finished weight of 53 kilos. I was younger and thinner then. I had a gynaecologist. I saw the same gynaecologist throughout both pregnancies. That does not happen here. You have a hodgepodge of staff. You're lucky if you get a gynaecologist twice during the pregnancy. I did have problems, actually, and the gynaecologist I had asked me very sincere questions about my lifestyle that could be impacting pregnancy. Did I suffer from EDACHs? I told him I didn't. I'll let you work that out. But also, the hospitals were immaculately clean, fully staffed. I had a week in hospital. That's unheard of here. A week in a clean hospital. When a friend of mine, who's head of infectious diseases at Harvard, visited me in London when I had my 3rd child, he nearly fainted. They closed the ward because it was so dirty. There were bloody sanitary towels, I'm not going to spare you, falling out of the bins, and he actually nearly fainted at the sight of how dirty it was. We were all ushered out while they did a deep clean. with a tiny 2-day-old baby. You don't have a clue. And if you buy me a beer, I'll share with you the ratio of my Belgian pension compared to a British one and my American pension, because they pay far, far more than I receive from my British pension. They are... So my American, I think, is by a factor of 3, and my Belgian by a factor of 7. So I'm afraid, with deep affection for Councillor Nelson, this is political. This is very political, because people are not getting what they could get, because the way we spend money in this country, which happens to be directed by the national government, we don't get what we deserve. And Brexit has a lot to do with that.
Thank you very much, Councillor Clark. Councillor Harman, would you like to tell us what your amendment is? Thank you.
Well, I was hoping it would be accepted as a friendly amendment, actually, because I should remind you, I said I was actually going to vote for the motion, so I'm not voting against it. But to give it some more strength, I think I would like to move that the motion, when approved by this council, is referred to the Health Overview and Scrutiny Committee. And I'm sure that Councillor Bamfield will do a good job on it. I think also, if I might just say so, I think that's doing great disservice to that committee to say it's somehow Conservative-led, because it certainly has a Conservative chairman, Andrew Gravels, who is robust in his challenging of health authorities, in my experience. And it has representatives of all the districts. Councillor Cluke has said, you know, this unit doesn't just serve Cheltenham, it serves the wider county. So you will have representatives on there from the likes of Tewkesbury and Cotswold will be in the same position. So I think you do a disservice. I think it's practical. I'll still vote for the motion, but I would say to you, I think it would give it more wheels. Thank you.
Is the mover prepared to accept the amendment?
Not really sure we understand what the amendment is.
So are we clear what the amendment is? No. Okay. Can you read out your amendment, Councillor Harman?
That having been approved by this council, the motion is referred to the County Council's Health Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Perhaps you could add to receive reassurances about the future of the service.
I assume you have a seconder?
You need to get the wording so they can put it up on the screen.
We're going to put the wording on the screen so we're all clear what we're talking about.
Got the wording now.
On a point of order, is it possible to clarify whether that wording would be additional to all the wording that remains in the motion? Or does it substitute for any existing wording?
Additional, isn't it?
That's additional, isn't it? Yeah. In that case, we're happy to accept the amendment. Oh, so the mover is happy to accept the amendment. Okay, so
I don't know whether I don't know
are
if
we
it's been
saying,
accepted. I think they want to take.
do you want to have a break and take a 5-minute break so we're clear what we're voting on? Or I'll take a 5-minute break.
And hopefully they'll come back. Straight there.
Thank you. What an eventful afternoon. I'm thoroughly enjoying myself. Okay, so the mover is accepting the amendment as a friendly amendment, which means we won't be having any discussion on the amendment as part of the motion. Does anybody else want to speak on the motion before I ask the mover to sum up? No. Okay, so over to Councillor Beale to sum up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, members. Just want to say thank you for this really great debate. Lots of really great views put forward and lots of experiences. Really pleased that we have arrived at a situation where we have a unanimous approach on this significant problem of birthing units in Cheltenham. So thank you, everyone, for supporting. Thank you.
Thank you. So we now go to the vote. Okay, so that's carried unanimously, and I'll hand...
No, it's not. There's one abstention.
I'm learning. 31 for and 1 abstention. Thank you all very much, and I'll hand now back to the Mayor, Councillor Babbage.
Okay, thank you, councillors. Right, item 13 then. Any other item the Mayor determines as urgent and which requires a decision? There is none. So, on to item 14. So this is to take us into exempt session for the remaining items. So, the committee is recommended to approve the following: that in accordance with section 100A, part 4 of the Local Government Act 1972, the public be excluded from the meeting for the remaining agenda items, as it is likely that, in the view of the nature of the business to be transacted or the nature of the proceedings, if members of the public are present, there will be disclosed to them exempt information as defined in the paragraphs 3 and 5, part 1, schedule 12A, Local Government Act 1972. Namely, paragraph 3, information relating to the financial or business affairs of any particular person, including the authority holding that information, and paragraph 5, information in respect of which a claim to legal professional privilege could be maintained in legal proceedings. Councillors, we need a vote on that, so please use your... just indicate by show of hands, please.
That's carried.
And that is carried. Thank you very much. We'll just take a moment whilst we turn off the stream.